day, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with yet another inspiring episode of We're Talking Shift. You know, this podcast is called We're Talking Shift because there comes a point in everyone's life where they need to make a shift in order to evolve. Because you know what? If we're not evolving, well, then by default, we're stuck. So we talk about a variety of things on this show that are about helping us continue to evolve in some way, shape, or form. That's what it always boils down to, because I believe that's essentially what we're here to do. So, on that note, Lauren, hi, what's happening in your world? What do you want to dive into today?
Loree, I am on trial. I've been accused of toxic behavior and specifically called out for having boundaries.
Oh,
Boundaries. And I am
mm,
not a person who really has had a lot of firm boundaries with people. So this accusation comes as a shock to me, and it just seems like a person who's previously trampled all over me is now upset about boundaries.
oh yeah, that happens. when when people have had kind of an open door policy to your life, and then all of a sudden you shut the door, they don't like it. They
No.
they get annoyed real quick, and can get pretty feisty. So
It's
so
crazy. I was
interesting.
accused of being toxic for having boundaries and that my boundaries, don't serve everybody else. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
they're not supposed to. That's the point of the boundaries.
That is the whole point of boundaries. I mean, the, and again, people that if you've set a precedent in the past of not really having many boundaries, or you cave on them when somebody pushes in, and then all of a sudden you decide, no, I'm going to be firm about this, that's a tough transition for people to make when you are laying down a new rule, because basically boundaries are rules, right? There are personal rules that we set in so that it's showing others how we want to be treated. Basically, they help us protect our time, our feelings, and our personal space. So you got to think of it like a fence around the yard shows where your property starts and ends. They just and they show you where you begin and end. They establish, right? They establish what's okay for you and what's not. So we need boundaries to, well, to help keep us from getting overwhelmed, from being mistreated or taken for granted, and they help us to stay true to ourselves and to have healthier relationships, and basically to feel more control of our lives.
I love the fence that you just
Mm.
described around the yard because when you first said that, that made me think of like the fence in the backyard where I let the dog go out and play and she
Yeah,
can be unsupervised because she's safe in there. We are
right.
safe within our boundaries.
Exactly. That's the whole point. It's safely guarding the things that are important to you, your time, your space, your attention, your well-being in all shapes and forms. If you don't have boundaries, or if you try to have boundaries and then you really don't enforce them, it's kind of like, imagine yourself standing out on the ocean shoreline with a broom trying to sweep back the tide.
Ooh.
Right? How effective is that going to be? The tide's going to be like, oh, she's not going to be able to keep us out with that little broom,
No, the
and it
tide has
just
nothing to worry about. I'm not taking a broom on vacation. But
right, right. But that's what happens when you don't have a firm boundary. People will continue to sort of flow into your life, overstepping, because you're not enforcing, you're not using a tool like a boundary to keep them at bay, right?
absolutely.
Remember that I was that brings to mind, remember, well, of course you do, everybody knows the show Friends, right? They
My
have
favorite.
all these friends, and they have their apartments right across the hall from each other, and Like there's no boundaries. They are constantly just bursting in and out of each other's apartments. Nobody knocks. They just pop in whenever they want. And I'm like, it looks like all fun and games and how super, what a nice group of friends to have when you watch it on TV. But honestly, if I had somebody just bursting into my life at any time of the day or evening whenever they wanted to just pop in, that would make me bonkers. So we we need boundaries.
Well,
Um,
have you ever been a mom of toddlers?
and-
Because we don't get to go to the bathroom either. Mine
oh
are
no,
not toddlers, but
right.
I still, if I do lock the door, there's a chance the lock's getting picked.
Yeah, I used to say, please, unless you are on fire, do not come in this door when I'm in the bathroom. Unless someone is blue from choking or you're on fire, please wait until I emerge. Right? Because
Next thing I know, mine are in here setting lighters to each other, trying to see who can catch fire.
let's see if we can get her attention now. She'd
Exactly.
be in there going, do I smell smoke? So,
Yikes.
yeah. So anyway, there's a few examples just so that people are clear on all the different ways we can set boundaries. We can set time boundaries. Like maybe there's somebody that just constantly wants your presence or your attention. So it's like you could say I really can't hang out today or spend an hour on the phone with you today because I need time to rest or I need to finish some work or I need to take care of my family. This way you're letting other people know that your time matters and you have priorities and it's not necessarily them, right? um we can
I'm a
have
big fan of not justifying a reason, of saying, yeah, I have 20 minutes for you, but I have a hard out at 2 o'clock. You know what I mean? I don't
sure.
have to give you reasons
Yep.
why. Sometimes some people need that because the
Yeah.
ones who like to push boundaries will say, "Oh, I know you need to do such and such, but don't worry. I'll just be on the phone while you're finishing the laundry." No, you won't. I'm
Yeah.
done at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, you need to assess your audience. Some people, yeah, no reason is required, but there are some people in your life that you may want to have a more gentle approach and offer a bit of an explanation. But part of this is because you're setting a precedent, and letting them know that you have priorities. So it's not because you feel like you owe them an explanation of why you don't have the time. It's because you're letting them know they're not a priority. That's a different thing. You don't have to justify your behavior or your choices. You're just saying this is what matters most to me. So I can't do this with you, right?
That reminds me of when people will reach out sometimes and they'll say, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" It's like, that's a grenade. I am dodging that text message. I am not answering that question because
Mm.
why are you asking?
Hmm.
More importantly, what do you think I need to be doing tomorrow?
Maybe. I mean, just depends. Like, is it somebody just wanting to connect and chat, or is there an ulterior motive? Like, maybe she's got, if she doesn't have a lot going on, I can ask for something. So you,
Maybe. I feel like it's always a red flag, though. I think if you're upfront and you just say, "Hey, can you help me with this tomorrow?" Then I'll let you know, "No, I have this going on
Mhm.
tomorrow." Or, "Yes, I'd be happy to." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Because
I don't know that it's
basically,
always intentional, but it's
well,
always a red
yeah,
flag.
depending on the person, it's not really any of their business what's on your schedule for the next day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Just come with it. Tell me what you want.
yeah. It's different if it's your spouse, your partner, whatever. But then they have a right to know what's going on with you, right? We're
Sure.
in each other's lives, but there are very few other people that have a a right to know what's on your agenda for the
Exactly.
coming days. Yeah, so we've got emotional boundaries, right? um Saying something like, I don't really feel comfortable talking about that with you right now. That's fair. If somebody asks you a question that is really none of their business about how you're thinking or feeling about something,
Or what
um,
I'm doing tomorrow.
or what you're doing together, right, tomorrow, you could, you could just say, I don't feel comfortable talking about that right now. You could certainly be even a little more, um, I guess, to the point, and you don't even have to say, I don't feel comfortable. You could just say, I'm not discussing that with you. Again, depending on the audience, or maybe you want to be, um, I don't know, maybe it's even more. I'm never going to talk to you about those things. So stop asking. Just, but again, it, you have to set the emotional boundary, and it can be as soft as, I don't feel comfortable talking about that right now, or it can be less soft. I'm not discussing this with you now or ever.
Mhm.
So this way you're protecting and you're respecting your feelings, saying basically it's okay to take a beat when something feels too heavy, or you're just not in the frame of mind, or it's just none of their freaking business, right?
My favorite version of this one is, let's revisit this a little bit later, because for me, I feel like this is the one where, like, if emotions are heightened in the moment and we need to
Mhm.
circle back.
Right.
So maybe that's my version of this one.
Yeah, if that's your intention.
Sure, yeah. Now, if it's not, you're right, you're right. But I do tend to be a person who, like, let's just settle it. And if the outcome hurts your feelings, then we'll deal
Mhm.
with that later too. Maybe
Okay.
you'll deal with that.
Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll probably talk about that a little bit more here. I have questions, but let's finish like a couple more examples of boundaries. We can have physical boundaries, like if you're somebody that is really like, some people are huggers, even with new people they've just met, right? But some people aren't. So a physical boundary could be, I don't really like being hugged without being asked first, or I'm not a hugger. Or if it's somebody that is just all up in your grill, then you could just say, you're kind of all up in my space right now. So, I mean, I can literally tell what you had for lunch. So please back it up. Um, right? You're telling others to respect your body and your personal space. I don't want to
Absolutely.
know that you had, a chimichanga for lunch. That's too close. So, so
Keep it to
that's
yourself.
right. That's one. Technology. Please don't go through my phone or post pictures of me without asking. That's a good one,
Mm,
because I think that it's pretty common right now for everyone to just think it's okay to be posting whatever they want of whoever they want, whenever they want,
mhm,
wherever. And a lot of times people way overstep those boundaries. So I
mhm.
think it's a good idea to ask somebody for privacy and for some digital respect when it comes to those things. That's not unreasonable at all. That's just
Not at all.
thoughtful and respectful.
Yeah.
Um,
Some of the ones that seem obvious may need to be stated as well. A friend of mine had a baby, and her mother-in-law shared the first photos to social media before
mm,
the baby's parents were able to do that. So,
there you go. Mother-in-law got too enthusiastic and just blazed right over them.
but she saw nothing wrong with it until it was called out and
Mhm.
kind of brought to her attention what she had done, because to her, like, Facebook is her little curation of her friends and family. And,
Yeah,
how are they ever going to see the baby if I'm not sharing the pictures of you know what I mean? So,
right, right.
you know, it's important to have the boundaries and also communicate them, I think, when you're dealing with technology, especially, and like different generations and people who use technology in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And, she had good intentions, and she was just enthusiastic and excited and wanted to share this wonderful news. But it would have been good for her to take a beat and ask first, um, or for them to say, please hold off on until we've, give you the okay.
Right.
But anyway, we can have friendship boundaries like, um, I like being your friend or partner, but I don't like it when you make fun of me. This is a big one. I see this happen a
Mhm.
lot. Um, Setting limits this is about setting limits on how you want to be treated in relationships. It's really easy for people who are very, very familiar with someone to take teasing too far. So I've seen this happen between spouses a lot. Um, Family members, relatives, or just people that have been friends for a long time. And I think, when it turns into sometimes the good natured teasing goes too far and it turns into these little kind of passive jabs and
Mhm.
taking shots, and that can have the potential of embarrassing somebody. And when that happens, there's going to be somebody's feelings are going to get hurt. So you really need to speak up and tell that friend or relative or partner, that you're not okay with that that just really bothered you and embarrassed you or hurt your feelings or whatever the thing is. But I see that happen a lot. Especially with people that are really familiar with each other because they've known each other a long time or they're related. And it's just really easy to misread and take things too far. And that's not cool.
My mom and sisters are definitely in this group. And there are a lot of times when I'm so thankful because it's one of those things like you have pepper in your teeth. Like
Hmm.
nobody really wants to be told that, but they also don't want to continue having the pepper in their teeth.
Right.
So, yeah, my mom and sisters are very much like, oh, what is that dress you're wearing? I don't think that one's flattering on you know, things like that. On the one hand, like, thank you, I'm never wearing this again. And on the other hand, gosh, I feel absolutely awful. You know, nobody
Yeah.
else has my back like that, but also, damn.
Well, and again, it's just, I mean, it's one thing when you are trying to give somebody an opinion in the with the motivation of saying, you might want to think about this because it kind of doesn't look good. Um, Constructive criticism, again, you really need to read your audience and you need to know how well this person is going to receive you know, your joke or your constructive criticism. And so I get that. If I mispronounce a word, I'm really grateful when like my husband or my daughter or somebody corrects me because I don't want to go around mispronouncing words. So I don't get my ass chapped if somebody says, you didn't say that right. Here's how you actually say it. Thank you. I appreciate it. But that's different than taking shots at somebody. Do you know what I mean?
Agree.
All
I
right.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, lots of them. Lots of
Mhm.
different types of boundaries. I
Mhm.
don't know if I had ever thought about them in these different varieties. There are a lot more toxic boundaries I could probably enforce on this person who's saying I have too many boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and back to what you started out with, trying to how do we establish like new boundaries in maybe old relationships, like with an ex or with parents or anyone that's been in your life and has probably been allowed to overstep, and now you're just, this isn't working. I have to put a stop to this. So,
Specifically when the relationship changes.
yes. So it can feel, when you're trying to establish new boundaries, it can feel really awkward at first because it's new. But it is first of all, it's a really powerful act of self respect. So you need to keep that in front of your mind so that, your knees don't buckle every time somebody pushes back. But to establish, I would say, new boundaries in old relationships, first of all, you really need to get super clear um, on what your boundary is. What is it that you need and why do you need it? Yeah, and you want to do that so that you come across very firm, but you also want to do that so that you're avoiding blame. You don't want to have the intention of blaming the other person. That just makes people defensive. So this is more about understanding yourself and your needs. So a few different ways you could say something to somebody like an ex or parents or whatever is, I've realized I need to make some changes and feel more balanced and respected. That's a softer way. Maybe it's parents, so you want to be kind if they're your parents, but honest. So saying something like, I need to make some changes for the balance and well being of my family's schedule and our priorities, and then lay out what the boundary is. Um, if it's an ex, maybe it's something like, out of respect for my partner or the new spouse or whatever, and our schedules, we'll no longer be doing X, Y, and Z, but moving forward, instead, we'll need to fill in the blank, whatever the boundary is. And I'm asking you to please respect my wishes. So, those are some examples of how you might, bring this up with the people that, you've had relationships with, and now you're setting new boundaries.
Those are really good. Those are very helpful, and they don't leave a lot of room for arguing, you know.
Right, right. Because
I
you're
feel
using
like,
I statements. Yeah.
yes, I
Yep.
think in some cases I have hoped to enforce newer boundaries, and I've been met with, well, I also have this feeling to, consider. And it's like, well, that's fine. And we can all respect your boundaries too. But when I say like your phone call time with the children is at this time and it's more than generous and it works with our custodial arrangement and all of
Mhm.
our court documents reflect that
Mhm.
this is within that realm, and then you want to push back on that. I'll give you an example. Very specifically, phone calls with the kids.
Yeah.
My ex has those twice a day. They're in the morning, they're in the afternoon, and they are typically like going to and from school. So there's a length of time involved there. It happens to be on Bluetooth. If he ever indicated that he were less comfortable with my hearing the conversation, we could make an adjustment there. I don't have any problem with that. But it's in a certain space and time, and twice a day. That's kind of more than a lot of co-parents get, as far
Mhm.
as I can tell.
Mhm.
So don't call my house at 8 p.m. We are getting ready for bed. We are in a different routine that is not our phone call.
Mhm.
You're interrupting everything else that's going on. And you're
Mhm.
not entitled to FaceTime either. You don't
Yeah.
need to see inside my house. You don't need to know specifically all the things happening at whatever time you decide to FaceTime. So this has been a really hard one
Mhm.
for someone in my life. I think it's obvious
Uh-huh.
to come to terms with these requests, but also isn't making the most of the allotted
Mhm.
times that are given.
Okay. All right. So are you going to somehow enforce the boundary?
I have tried in different ways to say to be to justify my boundary by saying things like, well, you don't necessarily need to see what's going on. If you want to see your child's face, you're welcome to FaceTime during the allotted phone call time. But like, you don't need to just pop up and call. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Okay.
And so like justifying gives him room to say, well,
Mhm.
why can't I see my child's face
Yeah.
anytime I want to? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So
Yeah.
we've had these problems.
Okay. So what's the one thing you haven't done?
I probably need to be a little bit more general and just firm and not, I don't need a reason. This is the rule because I said it is.
Mhm. Okay. So he knows the rules. They've been laid down. They're not new rules.
They've been signed by a judge.
Okay. They're legal. Okay. And so if none of the things that you've said are landing, or he's just ignoring it, and again, like the waves, he's just washing right over you, right? So when the phone FaceTime goes off at 8 p.m. at night, what are your options to enforce the rule?
A couple of things I've tried have been quickly ignoring the phone call. If the kids see it, then sometimes that can be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I have toyed with the idea of blocking his number outside of the times he's supposed to be talking to us. That seems extreme to me.
Yeah. And then you have to remember to keep doing that on and off throughout the
Right.
right. So that seems a little, yeah, cumbersome.
That's a little hostile in my opinion. I
Yes.
don't love that idea.
Yeah.
But the disruption to the routine really is
Okay.
a lot,
Okay.
and it's unfair.
So how else can you ignore the call without the girls knowing there's a call coming in?
Um, I guess when we start kind of our evening routine, the phone can just be on do not disturb.
Hmm.
That, though, infringes on my right to be able to communicate with other people. I mean, it's my phone. I should be
Well,
able to have access to my phone as I want it.
yeah, but you can still look at your phone to see if you've missed a call or a text.
That's true.
And then once your kids are in bed, you can turn your do not disturb off.
I'm usually asleep. We
Okay, well
share
then
the
leave
same
it on. That's what I do when
bed.
I go to sleep.
You're
That's my boundary. Come a certain time of evening, do not disturb and silent goes on because I don't want anybody intruding on, my evening and my sleep pattern. So
exactly. Boundaries, healthy
that's a
boundaries.
healthy boundary. So the point is, this seems like an easy fix.
Does it? I feel like I've really struggled with this for a long time.
Well, it seems like once the hours of the evening come around that you do not want disruption, and it's not part of the scheduled time to communicate, then you turn your phone on do not disturb until the kids are in bed, and then you turn it off
Maybe
or
that's the
whatever.
solution.
But
Yeah, maybe.
it seems
Maybe. I
pretty
do.
easy. Just push a button,
It
Lauren.
does. It does. I struggle with that too though because like I said, if one of my sisters decides to call me or if, something's going on with my parents or whatever, I want to be able to be notified of that without having to shut myself off from the entire world to avoid one person.
But you're not
But
really shutting yourself off from the entire world. Most people have their phone either in their pocket or within arm's length all day wherever they go, right? You can check your phone
right.
every 10 minutes if you want to see if somebody's called that you really think you need to get back to.
Okay, fair.
Fair.
Maybe I'll try that. Maybe we'll test it out, see how it goes. Maybe I will love being unreachable by everyone
Hmm.
in the evenings. I'd be open to that.
Give it a try and see what happens.
We can do that.
Okay. It seems like actually the easiest solution to everything you just laid out.
Okay.
All
We'll try
right.
it. We'll try it. Let me
Okay.
hit you with another one.
Okay.
This also was an established relationship for a long time. This happened, we'll say to someone I know. I don't want to be very specific, but this person and her spouse had been very close, almost neighbors, physically close, almost neighbors with her parents. And after she had a baby, this is not the same one I referenced earlier, but she had her first child. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she found out through like her dad or somebody that the mom would drive by and like peek into the windows at the top of the garage to see if the car was there. And if the car was there, that means mom and baby are at home. And so she would go knock on the door. And when she found this out, she was like, this is so weird because it seems like every day I have my parents like coming to visit me at my house. And it was a different level, I think, when she found out about she's looking in the garage to see if the car is there.
Hmm.
But you've been neighborly and these are your parents. They live next door or, nearby. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, because there's a baby and they want to be there all the time, they they are looking at you can't even lie about it.
Well, I mean, clearly, this is another one of those laying down the boundaries. Just, I'm sure that that mother or mother-in-law, whichever it was, has a phone, and so
Yeah.
I guess
I
once,
feel like I think it was intentional. Like if she called or texted, then the daughter would have an out. But if you see the car there, then all of a sudden there's no way out.
Well, there is a way. I'm not up for visitors right now. That's
Yikes.
that's the way. I appreciate that you want to come visit, but I'm not up for it right now. I'll text you when the time is right, or I'll call you when the time is right. I mean, you know, it's just, I think people are so averse to having an uncomfortable conversation that you try to come up with all these other tactics and way around it that is still going to achieve the result you want. And so you're doing all these, mental or emotional gymnastics. It's like, just say, now's not a good time. It's just so much easier. I don't know. Just, be honest. You can still be kind, but you need to be direct. I mean, it's and family is just going to have to be okay with it. And if they're not, it's not on you. It's just that, they're going to have to adjust. But they're not going to adjust if you don't communicate clearly with them.
I agree. I think for a lot of people, it can be important to us. We make it important to us that we not step on toes and hurt feelings. But
Mhm.
the reality is that, like, you have to live your life. And if you feel like your mom is at your house every single day while you're trying to bond with your newborn, or, breastfeed without a bra on, or whatever the
Mhm.
case is, like, you have to take control of that situation, or it will continue to be controlled by other people.
Yeah.
So you're right. Be direct.
Yeah, you just need to be able to say, and you need to be able to get comfortable with it. And the only way you're going to get comfortable with it is if you do it. You need to say, I really need to stick to, these schedules, or I really need to stop, having hour-long phone calls, or whatever the thing is. You just have to be able to say, this is what I need. This is about communicating your needs, which again is establishing a boundary. And then you can, cap it off with, it would mean a lot to me if you could help me out with this. Right. So, the boundary has to be, in the best case scenario, it's in terms of your needs and it's not because of their faults. And as long as you say things in a way that is not blaming them or making something their fault or making them feel guilty, then you don't have anything to feel guilty about. It's fair that you have certain needs that need to be met in the context of having some boundaries and rules around those needs. And as long as you're not blaming anybody, it will prevent them from getting defensive, and it keeps the focus on your growth and your needs, right?
Yes, I love that. There's probably someone who really needed to hear that. Like, it's okay for you to prioritize your needs,
Mm-hmm.
because who else is going to?
Yeah. So, with people that you love, you still have to be direct, but you can still be kind at the same time. And you cannot just hint or hope that they're going to get it, because a lot of times they don't. They don't want to get it, or you're so vague that it's not really landing. They're not picking up on it. So be respectful, be kind, but be very clear. I love doing this with you, or I love when you do that, but I won't, I can't allow for such and such to happen anymore. And I'm not going to be discussing, my dating life with you anymore, mom. It's something I just want to keep private for now. uh I prefer, I realize maybe that you prefer that I spend more time with you and helping you with all the things in your life. But I know you'll understand me when I remind you that I have a family of my own and they are my first priority. If time opens up and I can be here to help you with fill in the blank, then I will. So that's very clear. You're saying what you need, you're saying what you cannot do. You're telling them this is why I have a valid priority, my own family. But it doesn't mean I don't want to help you. It just means I will when I can. That's fair. That's reasonable. Make sense?
You're speaking to somebody, Lori. I just know it. What about for people who tend to work off the clock. So
Mm.
I know when a lot of people shifted to like work from home, they
Hmm.
started to have a really hard time differentiating home life and work life. And I know for me, in certain jobs I've had, it's very easy to want to take a phone call from this source at whatever time it happens to come. Or my ex worked in sales, so he was kind of dealing with clientele anytime they needed him.
Hmm.
How do we establish some boundaries with work?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because, every situation is a little unique. I mean, first of all, what's the home life like? If you're single and you're taking work home and taking calls, throughout the evening, it might not be a big deal for you. You might be like, I'm hustling. This is the grind. I don't mind it. Unless you feel like you're really being taken advantage of, in which case you might have to stand up for yourself. But if you have a family that you care about and you intend to keep it healthy and intact for your entire life, well, then you might want to find an appropriate balance, either that or a new job. But, unless there are situations, maybe your spouse is very understanding and very supportive. And if you're in agreement that it's moving you and your family in a direction that you believe is good, you make it work. But when you or your spouse partner feels that things are getting too off balance for too long a period of time, then you'd need to reassess the situation. What or who is the priority? What's the cost of continuing like this? So you have to have a meeting of the minds and decide if this is, if can we still make this work without jeopardizing our relationship and our family life? Okay, we can do this for a little longer. If not, if one person is like, this is no longer working for me, then yeah, you probably need to have a conversation and figure out how to make things work or what changes need to be made in order for you to maintain harmony in the household. That's reasonable.
I agree. I got a big dose of perspective when I was in college. I studied abroad in Europe, and so many other parts of the world just shut down in the afternoon.
Hmm.
And people go have a coffee or a beer or take a 2 hour lunch break or a nap, run their errands, whatever it is that they need to do. And it's
Yeah.
just accepted that like we also have to live lives outside of work. And I think America has gotten into such a like hustle culture
Hmm.
that a lot of times we don't give ourselves the time to do anything else. And even if it's like a social thing, if it's getting a beer at 2 o'clock with a friend, like that's okay. It is okay. I mean, not if you're on the clock and you're not allowed to, but I mean, find a job you can do maybe that doesn't trample all over your other needs. So when I was in an interview once with this one guy, I had been in a previous interview like the week before where I had been told our workplace is a family. And to me, I know that sounds warm and fuzzy, but I was like, no, thank you. I have a family and they're more important than you, and you're not my family. And
Mm.
so that job was off the table for me. A few red flags. That was one of them. I
Hmm.
went into this other interview with this other guy, and he literally, most of the people who worked in his home office were his family, like his kids and his sister-in-law and his wife. They all managed his office. And so they actually were a family. And I made it clear to him, like, I appreciate the family atmosphere here, but like I care about my family too. So 5 o'clock, I'm done with you. And
Hmm.
I'm going home. And he appreciated that. And in fact, he hired me on the spot. So I
Mm.
think if you set those boundaries at work, if you can do it up front, like in an interview, go for it. I think people either respect it or they don't, but you need to know if they're
Right.
going to, or if you're going to be the one who's taking the brunt of the
Yeah.
disagreement there.
Yeah. And that's why, kind of what we said earlier, it's really important to know what it is that you need and why you need it. Why is this so important that you literally have to establish a boundary or a rule around it? And so you knew in that situation and you were able to use that as a part of your decision making process with, when it came to getting a new job. And it worked in your favor then.
It did. It
Mm.
did. I actually loved working there. They were a very family-friendly company, and when I needed to take time off for my kids, it was just understood that that was more important. So I
Right.
loved that. And I think if you hold yourself to a standard and you make it known that this is my standard, particularly in a workplace, because you don't have to have that relationship. Some
Mhm.
of these other boundaries we've talked about, like, unfortunately, you're still going to have a mother-in-law whether you piss her off or not.
Mhm.
But, that first job where they're like, "We're a family here." I'm not your family, and I never have to talk to you again. So, I think in a workplace, it's especially important and easier, in my opinion, to set some boundaries.
Sure. And for some other people, that statement about, our workplace is like a family, that might have been really appealing to some people. You,
Maybe.
so it just, what are your needs? That's really what it
Right.
boils down to. But and back to, like, yeah, the mother-in-law, the family, the exes, prepare for the pushback. And you already know because you've experienced it. But the old patterns, they die hard.
Mm,
Some people, when you lay down a new rule, they're going to feel hurt, they're going to feel confused or even angry, but you just be okay with it. Their reaction doesn't mean that your boundary is wrong. It just means it's new and they may not like it. But
mm.
your goal is not to appease them, it's to protect you and your needs in a healthy way. And there's nothing unreasonable about that.
I love that. How can we identify, let's say, for instance, when I first started working with you, I think I was in my late 20s
Mhm.
and I was very like overwhelmed, but I couldn't really identify what was causing me to feel constantly like busy, struggling, and keeping up with everyone and everything.
Mhm.
How can we identify like the areas of our lives or the relationships where we need to reassess our boundaries?
Oh, I think when you need them. I think you just feel it. You have to pay attention to how you feel. Your feelings about it, the thing, will reveal the truth. So
Mm,
even if you're trying to convince yourself that maybe you're being unreasonable or selfish, your feelings won't lie. Your mind will, but your feelings won't. So when you are in, some sort of a situation with someone and you're feeling uncomfortable, that's your sign. How do I feel about this? This does not feel good to me. This feels like I don't want this. When there's resistance, then you need to have some sort of a boundary or approach this in some way that is going to work for you. Does that make sense? And
yes.
you don't need a whole list of watch for these red flags. All you have to do is pay attention and honor how you're feeling about it. That's
Mm,
like that's just that's your barometer. That's going to tell you everything you need to know. And then you can analyze and think through, what is it about this that I don't like? What is it about this person or this situation or, whatever it is, what is it about this that is making me uncomfortable? What would make me more comfortable? What would make me feel like there's nothing to resist here? So you that way you get clear on why you feel the way you feel and what needs to change.
okay. Lori, I tend to be an empath. So, although I'm certain I have never crossed any boundaries for anyone I've ever met, I'm going to put this shoe on the other foot and ask you, if I am having a hard time with someone else's boundaries,
Mm.
how can I approach that in conversation? And I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
When my ex-husband and I were first married, he had been in a pattern of going to the gym after work
Mm.
every evening. And
Mm-hmm.
that was fine. We were both working professionals. And so I also had my downtime right after work. And then we came together later in the evening and, we were childless. But later, when I became a stay-at-home mom and we need to get into a bedtime routine, you need to be a part of the kids' day before they go to sleep. I he didn't push back on this, but I did have to say, like, I don't know when you're going to the gym now, but it's not going to be in the evenings anymore. And so he actually took the European approach and started going in the middle of the workday. And we made that work. Fortunately, that did work. But how do how do we approach something like that? If someone else's self-care or their routine or a boundary, I would understand. I would have to understand if a
Mm-hmm.
person who is used to going to the gym every day says,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to compromise on this. Then what?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, to your point, you have to respect that. Um, you don't have to like it or agree with the boundary, but you would start by acknowledging that the other person has a right to care for themselves. You know, their boundary isn't necessarily wrong, but understandably, in this context, it could feel very unfair. Obviously, circumstances changed, but the behavior didn't adjust until you had to, say this isn't working. So maybe you said something like, or for somebody else, dealing with this now, maybe it's something like, I get that going to the gym is important for you, for your mental and your physical health, and I want to support that. But at the same time, I'm feeling overwhelmed with, dinner and homework and bedtime alone, every night or whatever. So I need us to find a way to make this feel more fair. So this way you've expressed your needs without guilt tripping them, with the goal of creating a more balanced system together. So collaboration is the goal here. You don't want to turn this into a competition, or what do I get now? You're getting too much. I'm not getting enough, whatever. So boundaries work best in relationships when they're a two-way conversation, not a tug of war. So rather than fighting about who's right and whose needs are more important, you shift the focus to shared problem solving. So you would say maybe something like, how can we make space for both your gym time and a more equal load at home? Can we adjust the schedule or trade off certain nights? Right. So now you're in a problem solving collaborative state, rather than somebody's trying to defend their right to go have their time. I think compromise sometimes is in order when somebody has a non-negotiable like that, like going to the gym. Then there's part of the problem solving might involve a little bit of compromising, like, hey, can you go to the gym 3 evenings a week, and then 3 other evenings then I get to leave the house for an hour or two to go do something that I want to do. That's something that, an example of a problem solving solution. So come up
I
with
like it.
come up with possible compromises, suggest them, and see, if where there's a will there's a way. If everybody really wants to find a solution and is respectful of each other's needs, then a solution will be found.
So is it fair to say then that boundaries should, in certain circumstances, be flexible?
Yeah, I think so. Some things work for a while, and then circumstances change, and sometimes that means the boundaries or the rules have to change too. Nothing stays the same forever. I mean, here's a example of maybe a time when you need to remove some boundaries. Let's say you're somebody that had a string of bad relationships, and so now you are filled with um, disillusionment and distrust. So you've put up boundaries.
Hmm.
And one of those boundaries is you don't really let people in very easily because you don't want to get hurt anymore. It's never gone well. So now I have rules and boundaries, and the walls are kind of high, and you're only going to get so deep with me. Okay. So when you first put those boundaries up, it was a matter of your protecting yourself, emotional survival. I need to have a safe space and I just can't, open my heart to trust anybody anymore. Okay, but let's say now a few years have gone by and you're feeling a little lonely and you're thinking you'd like to have a relationship, but you still have all these boundaries up. So even when you meet somebody or you try to get to know someone or they try to get to know you, it just doesn't go anywhere because you have boundaries that you put up, from all of your past experience, and you haven't dismantled them yet. So they're actually now sort of fencing you in and keeping you from evolving and maybe having a really nice relationship with somebody. So there comes a time when we put rules and boundaries in place for emotional survival to protect ourselves, because we just need some space. But then sometimes you get to a point where your needs have changed and what you're willing to do and allow into your life has changed, but you still have the same fence up. And therefore you have a conflict now. You want somebody to come in, but you have too many walls up. So then it's time to reassess and go, maybe I need to relax some of these boundaries a little bit. Otherwise, you literally are going to kind of put a cap on what's available to you.
Yeah, I like what you said about how that can limit your growth and your evolution as a person.
Right. Right.
The boundaries that were set for you when you were, a small child of,
Mhm.
not playing in the street after dark kind of thing. It's
Or
sometimes
during the
we
day.
don't play in the street.
Ever.
Sometimes we grow and we need to make some changes there. So yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely can appreciate that, Loree. Is there
Yeah.
anything else we need to know about boundaries? Oh, I've been accused of having toxic boundaries. Is there such a freaking thing as a boundary that is toxic?
I don't even know. That seems kind of contradictory, or just I don't know how those two things work together. I mean, can you give me an example? What's a toxic boundary?
Any that this person doesn't agree with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they don't have to agree with your boundary. All they have to do is respect it, right? You have the right to voice your needs and you have the right to work towards, solutions in the form of whether it's, with a partner who's trying to get to the gym 3 nights a week, or whether it's with an ex who still has access to you because you have, shared custody of children, parents who are going to be in your lives. All of those things are pretty common for people, but um, just because those relationships exist doesn't mean that you don't have the right to have some boundaries in place. And they're boundaries that, should support your well-being and the well-being of your family. That always has to come first. Your family, when you have a family, you have children, you have, a new partner, that always should come first. And everyone else is just going to have to take a back seat, whether they like it or not.
I don't think we could say it any better than that.
Mm. All right. Well, that was interesting. Boundaries are an
Yeah.
interesting thing. Um,
They're fun. I think they're good for you. If you're a person who feels you don't have boundaries in place or that people are taking advantage of you at every turn, try some boundaries.
mhm.
They could make your life a little better.
Well, that's the thing too, because when you don't, then you have a tendency. When you don't have boundaries in place, you have a tendency then to get resentful of people who keep overstepping, and you start to blame them for overstepping. But if they don't know that they're overstepping because you haven't set that precedent, then you have this conundrum with you want them to sort of be psychic and read your mind, because you are too, I don't know, timid to lay down a boundary, to say something. You don't have the backbone, or you are just so much more concerned with their feelings than your own. So you're constantly compromising your needs for somebody else. Then you're going to just build up resentment. And that's not a good feeling. That's not a good headspace to be in all the time. So it really is a good practice if there's something that's really, you know, not working for you, step up, set a boundary, kind but firm, and stick to it.
I love what you said about making it about your needs and not someone else's faults,
Yeah.
because while identifying what a boundary needs to be could stem from somebody else's fault, it doesn't, it really isn't that. It is about what you need. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Making it about somebody else's fault is not gonna it's not gonna help you get what you need. It's gonna just create more conflict because people will be defensive when they feel like they're being blamed or have a guilt trip laid on them. Um, and it's pointless. Even if it's true to to what you just said, it's not gonna help you get what you ultimately need.
I agree. If you are loving the podcast, we invite you to find us on social media. And more importantly, please subscribe, rate, review wherever you are listening. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a
Mhm.
covert message, maybe it's just somebody who needs some boundaries in their lives, but share it with a friend
Yeah.
or a mother in law or an
Yeah,
ex.
there's always somebody. We all know people like that. And maybe it's maybe it's you or somebody you know, but share the good shift. Don't keep it all to yourself. And on that note, thanks for hanging out with us, you guys. Go make some epic shifts happen in your lives.